PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. And this is part 2 of our Throwback series. As part 1, we did a while back, a few episodes ago, where I talked about the top 10 prospects from the Vegas Golden Knights in year 1, broke down what the prospects were and what their future was as of now. So for part 2 of this flashback episode, we are going to be taking a look back at the inaugural 2017-2018 roster for your Vegas Golden Knights, and going to be discussing where some of these players are now. Where are your former Vegas Golden Knights ended up in the NHL? Because there is a reasonable and a decent amount of former Vegas Golden Knights who are still on NHL rosters. So we're going to start from A to Z. This is going to be in no fanfare, no fan favorite type of order, just from A to Z when it comes to NHL teams. So we'll start out with players who are on an NHL roster, and then if we have time, get into the minors, because there are still a few guys from this 2017-2018 team that are in the AHL, but they are still playing professional hockey. And then if we have any time left towards the end of the video, we will then discuss the teams that are not in North America and try to go into Europe and the rest of the world and see if there's any Vegas Golden Knights players in the 2017-2018 team still playing professional hockey, just not in the United States. But that is just in case we get some time left. So this is going to be a very fun episode, doing a throwback and discussing the 2017-2018 roster with the Vegas Golden Knights and where are they now. So starting out this episode, we are going to go over to Buffalo, New York, and start with the Sabres, because number 89, Alex Tuch, for the Buffalo Sabres. And when it comes to Alex Tuch, this is a player who they took during the expansion draft. He was someone who was added on because the Minnesota Wild wanted to protect certain players, so they gave Eric Holla, who we'll talk about later in this show, and Alex Tuch. Now, he had a few solid seasons with the Vegas Golden Knights organization, but he eventually was moved in the Jack Eichel trade as a main piece of it. But for the Buffalo Sabres, he is still there, still a hometown New York guy who is playing for the Buffalo Sabres out there, and he has done reasonably well with the Buffalo Sabres organization. I mean, this is a player in Alex Tuch that even when you look at his most recent numbers and you see what he has done in Buffalo, he has been a consistent at least 20-goal scorer. He has been a guy who will give you at least 60 points, and there was a 36-goal season that Alex Tuch did with the Buffalo Sabres organization. And, I mean, his ceiling could maybe even be over 80 points, because we saw him do that in his second year playing with the Buffalo Sabres. There's also the same guy who is plus minus has been positive over the last few years he has been in Buffalo compared to some of his other teammates that he has out there in the Sabres organization. So him, Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins. There's been some really good talent that's been there with the Buffalo Sabres, but so far Tage and Alex have really been the standout 1-2 punch out there with the Buffalo Sabres. I like what Alex Tuch is doing, and he has become a really good player out there in Buffalo. And like I mentioned before, this is a guy when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, he never got to the mark that he is with the Buffalo Sabres, but a 36-goal season and over, around 70 points, that is an incredible mark by Alex Tuch. and we saw that with the Buffalo Sabres organization. So overall, Alex Tuch, him having a really good career out there in Buffalo after spending about 4 seasons with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And obviously, when we're doing these throwback videos and when we're doing these flashback episodes and talking about players who are no longer in Vegas, this is a disclaimer. I don't feel like I have to say this, but I'm going to anyway. I wish everyone on this list and everyone on this video the best in their team. All right. Whatever team they are currently on, I wish them the best moving forward. So for Alex Tuch, I hope that eventually he breaks past the 80-point mark because we've seen what his career best was with the Buffalo Sabres. So this is a guy who's doing really well. I mean, he is, towards his late 20s at this point, but still doing a real solid job there. So continuing with the A to Z, starting out with the Buffalo Sabres, let's move over to the Carolina Hurricanes and the most recent name to be added to this list after signing a 6-year deal, in the offseason, the one that just happened, and William Carrier. I mean, 6-year, $12 million. I mean, this is a $2 million annual value. And for a misfit, and for a guy who had been with the Vegas Golden Knights since that day one from 2017, 2018, him going out, being with the Carolina Hurricanes organization. I mean, listen, William Carrier is a consistent, reliable bottom 6 forward. He's been that way with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. I mean, 7 seasons he played with the Vegas Golden Knights. And, he had a breakout year in that 22-23 season, scoring over a dozen goals. Didn't pan out that much in his last year at Vegas, only scoring half a dozen goals. But with William Carrier, I think the Carolina Hurricanes are going to be getting a good veteran bottom 6 forward. He could be on your 3rd line. He could be on your 4th line. But William Carrier moving over to the Carolina Hurricanes organization, and I wish him the best in Carolina. Now, regardless of how many games he plays, everybody does know that he didn't even play half the season in his last year at the Vegas Golden Knights. Will he be a part-time guy for Carolina? Will he be a full-time guy? Obviously, he has 6 years to kind of show if he will or if he won't. But overall, when it comes to William Carrier, the one thing I will say positively about him is that come playoff time, he is someone that plays almost every single game. In fact, I can't recall the last time that he missed considerable amount of time come playoff time. I mean, in his last season playing in Vegas, he played all 7 games. And when they had that magical Stanley Cup run in 22-23, he did play a considerable amount of time on that playoff roster. So Carolina Hurricanes being a playoff contending team, him being a bottom 6 forward when they're playing in the playoffs does make a lot of sense. So for William Carrier, kind of the newest addition to the former VGK situation. But since we're going from A to Z, first to start out the Buffalo Sabres and Alex Tuch, and now it is going to be the Carolina Hurricanes and William Carrier. Now continuing with this and moving over, we're going to stay in the C's, but we are going to go over to the Colorado Avalanche, as there is a bottom 6 forward who did spend 2 seasons with the Vegas Golden Knights during that 2017-2018 and then 2018-2019 season. But he went from being an undrafted player to now playing over 700 games in the NHL, and that is forward Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. And it's a real interesting story how he went from being with the Philadelphia Flyers to start out his career, being a bottom 6 guy, comes to Vegas during the expansion year, was a really good face-off specialist for the Vegas Golden Knights, won plenty of face-offs, and then moved over to the Colorado Avalanche, spent a few seasons there, moved over to Tampa Bay, spent a few seasons there, did a one-off in Seattle, now back with the Colorado Avalanche organization. And Pierre-Edouard Bellemare is a guy that you can really sit here and appreciate the story around it. I mean, after all, not many players from France end up getting not just playing in the NHL, but spend the amount of seasons that Pierre-Edouard Bellemare has been in the NHL. After all, there's only 2 Frenchmen from France that played 700 or more games in the NHL, and he is on that list. So overall, when it comes to his story and the fact that he is around 40 years old and he is still a guy who can play professional hockey is a solid job. So Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, look, this is a 4th-line winger. This is a guy who can play the center position. He can play the wing if he has to. Line player and someone who can be, a part-time guy or a full-time guy. This is a really good situation there. So yeah, Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, wanted to shout him out real quick because he has done a really good job, and being back with the Colorado Avalanche organization is a solid job by Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. Wish him well. Him being around 40 years old, it'll be interesting to see how many more years he has left in him. But yeah, really happy to see him still playing professional hockey. So as we are talking about the players from the 2017-2018 season, this is going to be a 2-for-1, 2 birds with 1 stone kind of situation, as we are going to be talking about a team that is the reigning, defending champion. And this is going to be a lot of fun, as we are going to be discussing the Florida Panthers. And really cool. I definitely wanted to talk about them for a while now. But when it comes to Florida, this is an organization that you look at, and they do have 2 former players from the 2017-2018 roster. And the first one is Schmitty, Nate Schmidt. And his story kind of similar to Pierre-Edouard Bellemare in a way. Undrafted, gets signed as a free agent by the Washington Capitals. And he plays a few years in Washington, gets claimed by the Vegas Golden Knights during the expansion draft. He spends 3 seasons in Vegas before getting traded and being sent over to Vancouver for a 1-year situation. Then he gets dealt over to Winnipeg. He spends a few years there. They buy him out, and Nate Schmidt now ends up on the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers organization. And Nate Schmidt has been someone who's going to play well over 70 games per year. He is a reliable guy, someone that you can have on that team, and he will play almost every single game. Now, he's not going to score that many goals. On the point sheet, you're not going to get as much production, 15, 20 points around there. But his plus-minus has always been a standout. He had over a plus 20 in Vegas at one point, and his last year in Washington, he was almost plus 20 as well. And he has been a plus on the plus-minus side over the last few seasons, so he is a good defenseman to have. And considering the amount of years he's been in the NHL, I could say that he is going to be around 700 games, going to be about 750 games by the time all of this is up. And for Nate Schmidt, this is a solid career that he has had. And signing with the champions out there in Florida is definitely going to be a good situation. And considering that they are going to be a playoff team, he is going to be a benefactor and a reliable defenseman to have on a Stanley Cup run when it comes to Florida. And then the second player on here is Tomas Nosek. And Tomas Nosek, another undrafted guy. A lot of people, there was a decent amount of undrafted players the Vegas Golden Knights ended up having on this 2017-2018 team. And they took him from Detroit. He ends up going to Vegas. He spends 4 seasons with the Golden Knights organization as a capable bottom 6 forward who would score, just over over half a dozen goals every single year. Then he goes over to the Boston Bruins organization. He spends a few years there. Then he just was with the New Jersey Devils organization. Didn't do as great as he did out there with Boston. And then with the Florida Panthers organization as a bottom 6 forward. Now, he's going to be a guy that you are going to have plug in and plug out of the lineup, but he is a really good player to have in your organization. And when it comes to Tomas Nosek, this is a guy who has played over 400 games in the NHL. And, he is at year 10 now in his NHL career. So Tomas Nosek, Nate Schmidt, on the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, and that is good for them. And obviously, when it comes to Schmidt and when it comes to Nosek, we'll always wish him the best moving forward out there in Florida. And the next organization, because once again, we are going from A to Z here, talking about the 2017-28 roster and where they are now. And this is the trifecta for the former Vegas Golden Knights players, as the Minnesota Wild have not one, not two, but a trio of players who played on the 2017-2018 roster. And the biggest name on here, his retirement tour, and that is Marc-Andre Fleury. Now, everyone remembers Flower. Everyone talks about in Vegas how valuable he was to the Golden Knights organization, coming from Pittsburgh, winning all those Stanley Cups, comes to Vegas, helps to make the Stanley Cup final in year one. Now, after spending a few seasons in Vegas, he goes over, has a short run in Chicago, and then ends up in Minnesota, where he is now and where he is going to be hanging up his skates when it comes to his career. But they also have a defenseman in John Merle. And this was a guy who spent a few seasons in Vegas coming off his tenure in New Jersey. And then he spent time in Detroit and then moves over to Minnesota, where over the last few seasons, he has become a good, capable defenseman that they can have plug in and plug out of the defensive pairings. Now, I know he played just one game in the 2017-2018 season, but since he counted, and I made sure I looked up Hockey Reference, I looked up Hockey DB to see who would count for this version of 2017-2018 roster. Since his name appeared on there, Dylan Ferguson is with the Iowa Wild of the AHL. So since he is in the organization out there in Minnesota, I wanted to include Dylan Ferguson here. But yeah, Minnesota Wild having a couple former Vegas Golden Knights players from year one is crazy to think about. And, obviously a lot of people are going to miss Marc-Andre Fleury when he does retire and hang it up. So, yeah, continuing this part of it, very fascinating what Minnesota has done with those players and them now being in Minnesota. And the next team on this list is going to be a sore subject, but I will try to keep it brief when we're talking about the 2017-2018 roster and where the former players are now. Now, when it comes to talking about the misfits, and this is going to be putting salt in an open wound, as Jonathan Marchessault, who was the big name to lead the Vegas Golden Knights in the previous offseason. Now, Nashville Predators, we'll see how he does throughout his tenure there in Nashville. But considering the amount of names that are on this list and all the people that are kind of interesting to see what is going to happen to them and what ended up with them after leaving the Vegas Golden Knights, I wanted to keep this brief. But yes, Nashville Predators, Jonathan Marchessault, he is a misfit that is no longer in Vegas. And we all know that he is now playing in Nashville. So let's move on from Jonathan Marchessault and let's get on to players that some people have either, not known what ended up happening to them, or players that some organizations are now someplace else. So yeah, Jonathan Marchessault, Nashville Predators, previous offseason signed with them. We already know the deal there. Let's move on. Now, since we are going from A to Z, let's stay in the N side of it. And we're going to go over to New Jersey. And there's actually a 2-for-1 here, as you have two former players from the 2017-2018 team. And the first one they took from the expansion draft, Minnesota Wild. And even though he only played 2 seasons with the Vegas Golden Knights organization, and Eric Holla ended up getting hurt in that second year, and it was actually one of the lasting images of him being in a Golden Knights uniform, is when he got hurt against Toronto. They eventually moved on from him. He gets traded to Carolina. Interesting enough, they got Nicholas Waugh back in that deal. That's how Vegas got him. And, he went from Carolina, and then he was in, Nashville for a while, and then he was in Florida, and then Boston. And now he has kind of found a home in New Jersey as he has played a couple of seasons. Played well over 600 games and about 700 games worth of hockey games in the NHL. And for a player like him, it's really fascinating to see with Erik Haula how he has ended up being in his career. And look, he's a middle six forward. He's a guy who's going to score around a dozen goals. He'll rack up, about a dozen assists. That is who Erik Haula is. But, it is good to see him really, really kind of find a home now and find his footing out there in New Jersey, as I think this is actually the longest he has been with a team since his original home in Minnesota. And then you have Tomas Tatar, who has been with New Jersey, but leading up to that run in New Jersey, he has been all over the place in his career. So the guy that some people nickname Tuna, he had a long career in Detroit. Then the Vegas Golden Knights traded for him at the 2018 trade deadline, trying to make a Stanley Cup final, which they ended up doing. Didn't make that big of an impact in the playoffs, though, when they went to go get him to try to help in the Stanley Cup final. But then after that season, he was in the Max Pacioretty deal with Nick Suzuki. Interesting enough, I had talked about Nick Suzuki in the part one of this series, but Tomas Tatar was in the second part of it. So for Tomas Tatar, this was a guy who was, spent a few years in Montreal. Then he was in New Jersey for a little bit. Then he went to Colorado and then went back to New Jersey. So this is really a part two in terms of his stops in the New Jersey Devils organization. So for Erik Haula and Tomas Tatar, these are two guys who are now finding a home in New Jersey. And look, I think at this point in his career, this guy, established veteran in his around mid-30s now, and, he'll get, a decent amount of games out of him. You'll get, anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen goals every single year. So overall, Tomas Tatar, Erik Haula playing out there in New Jersey. And when you move on and you go over into the O, of course, we were talking about the Ottawa Senators, and the one player that is in Ottawa's organization from the 2017-2018 season is David Perron. And David Perron, this was a 2017-2018 only season that he played with the Vegas Golden Knights, as he left and went back to St. Louis after that one season. And then after being in St. Louis for a while and spending a couple of years playing in St. Louis and helping them win a Stanley Cup, he would then move over to Michigan and play for the Detroit Red Wings, have a solid run there, and then he signs with the Ottawa Senators in free agency on a 2-year deal. I mean, look, David Perron, kind of similar to a few guys on this list that I mentioned, he is a player who is in his mid to late 30s now at this point in his career. And this is someone who's already played well over 1,000 games in the NHL. And he can get you around a dozen goals. He will get you about 40 points every single year. Of course, we'll see if age has anything to do with him decreasing or declining in stats there. But overall, with David Perron, this is a good player. It's someone who only spent that 1 year in Vegas, but he did make a massive impact with his 50 assists that he had in one season with the Vegas Golden Knights. So he did help him make the Stanley Cup final. That is his legacy here in Vegas. But the only player from Ottawa that is from that 2017-2018 team. The Toronto Maple Leafs are next on here, and Ryan Reeves is the only player from the 2017-2018 season that came from Vegas. Now, when it comes to Ryan Reeves, he had been in St. Louis, he had been in Pittsburgh. Vegas gets him at a trade deadline to bring some more physicality and some toughness to the team. He spent a good amount of time in Vegas, and then they went over to New York Rangers. Then he went to the Minnesota Wild. Now he has found a few seasons in Toronto. Of course, there has been articles and there's been videos, even videos from a few months ago that we talked about possibly bringing back Ryan Reeves to the Vegas Golden Knights organization, but him being in Toronto for the time being. Colin Miller is with the Winnipeg Jets organization, and this was a defenseman that the Golden Knights got from the Boston Bruins during the expansion draft. And overall, he has been a good, consistent defenseman. In fact, throughout his entire career, ever since leaving Vegas, he's kind of bounced around a little bit, being from team to team the last couple of years. But overall, with Colin Miller, him playing over 500 games in the NHL, and I like what we have seen from him, regardless if it's been in Buffalo or if it's been in Dallas or if it's been in New Jersey or now in Winnipeg. I mean, this is just a situation where Colin Miller has become an established veteran who knows what he is doing. Now, this is kind of going to be the speed round version because there is Dream Minor League teams I'm going to be referencing here. So with about 4 minutes left in the show, I'm not going to go in depth on these three teams. I'm just going to quickly mention them. The Anaheim Ducks, a.k.a. the San Diego Gulls, they have at goaltender Oscar Dance and at forward Ryan Carpenter. Now, Ryan Carpenter had been a waiver claim that Vegas got from the San Jose Sharks. He spent a few seasons in Vegas, and then he moved on. He went around, a couple of teams, being between the NHL and the AHL, spent some time back in San Jose. Now with the San Diego Gulls and the affiliate of the Anaheim Ducks, Oscar Dance, he has been around the AHL for a while now, going between team to team, spending, time, for example, out there in Calgary and organizations like that, now being in Anaheim in the AHL. Another player, and this guy is actually a captain of a AHL team, and that is right here. And this guy, solid veteran, Stephane Matteau. And this is a good player that the Columbus Blue Jackets have as their captain in the AHL out there with the Cleveland Monsters. And then lastly, Brad Hunt, who has become a well-established AHLer at this point. He spent a few years with the Colorado Eagles, who were the affiliate of the Colorado Avalanche. This was a player who was with the Vegas Golden Knights for a year and a half, has bounced around the league ever since then, but has been an established AHLer, occasionally NHLer. But yeah, with the Hershey Bears of the AHL, which is the affiliate of the Washington Capitals, and really interesting what happened there when it comes to Brad Hunt. I mean, he's still playing in the NHL, occasionally, but he's mostly playing in the AHL. And then I saved this for last because they're playing professional hockey. It's just not at the NHL or AHL level. Brendan Lepsic, he is playing in the KHL out there in Russia, and so is one of the worst free agent signings in Vegas Golden Knights history, Vadim Shiparov, who went straight back to Russia after having a cup of coffee and a few games in the NHL with your Vegas Golden Knights. In Sweden, playing out there in the Sweden Hockey League, you have Oscar Lindberg and Maxime Lagacé, and they are two guys who are out there playing in Sweden. Oscar Lindberg had spent, 2 years with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. They traded him in Ottawa for the Mark Stone deal. And then Lagacé, he was a backup goaltender, splitting time between the Vegas Golden Knights and, the AHL during that point in time. Has bounced around a couple of AHL teams, now has found a home playing professional hockey out there in Sweden. And then Tomas Hyka, out there in the Czech Republic, he had been a good, first-year guy, someone who had been in the AHL with the Chicago Wolves and then playing a few games in the NHL with the Vegas Golden Knights, him playing in the Czech Republic. So this is the video discussing the 2017-2018 roster and doing a Where Are They Now kind of episodes. This is a fun little flashback episode I wanted to do on this channel. So until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rakelli, and go Knights go, and have a good
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.